Let us look at this one coming from the northern part of the country, a situation where a northerner, of course, have risen in defense of Tinubu. And of course, this time around, he's blaming the North for the woes of the North. Of course, northern leaders. And I think he's correct because the North, the leaders have always occupied Nigerian leadership position in the past, and they have not been able to use that to better the life of the lots of the people in the northern part of the country. But let's look at what he's saying. He said, Fulani defense Tinubu blame northern leaders for region's woes. He goes further to say that former Kaduna Central Senator Fulani has said the North's poverty, insecurity, and decaying infrastructure are the result of failed leadership by past northern leaders, not the policies of President Bola Tinubu. Receiving members of the Tijaniya Grassroots Mobilization and Empowerment Initiative of Nigeria at his Kaduna residence on Tuesday, Sani accused past leaders from the region of squandering opportunities and looting resources while neglecting the people who trusted them with power. He goes further to say that we had Buhari in power for 8 years, yet did not remain impoverished. Industries like KTL, UNTL, Northeast, Arewa Textiles, and others were abandoned. Our leaders chased personal gains, not people's progress, he said. Sani described it as deceptive and unjust to paint the region's problem on Tinubu, who has been in office for just 2 years, when decades of mismanagement precede his presidency. I think this is quite quite interesting. But for me, I think I totally agree with him. In as much as I agree that this government have not been able to address the concern of Nigerians, but the North blaming this government for the poverty in the North, for out of school for out of school children in the North, I think it's unacceptable. Because for instance, we all know that in the North, the issue of insecurity is occasioned by religious belief. And in most cases, the people in the North, they are not being sincere, they are not being patriotic enough to enable the federal government to fight this issue of insurgency. That is why we allow you to watch the video of a House of Assembly member in Borno who witnessed firsthand what a Jonathan government did. Of course, when they deployed machineries, when the election was postponed for 2 weeks, that 2015 election. Just listen to him and make a sense of what he's trying to say as we come back to further this conversation.
You cannot just sit down watching them to do whatever they feel like doing simply because they are professionals. You cannot talk to them. Give them target. During Jonathan, we brought mercenaries. They were about to finish Boko Haram. But because of our complacency and personal aggrandizement and personal interest, we asked them to go back. And we are still battling with the issue. I was in Borno State as a member of a state House of Assembly when the mercenaries were in Borno. There were less than 30. They operate in a place like this. Everybody with a laptop before him, observing what is happening in the bush. The moment they discover an enclave, they will be able to identify how many weapons do they have, what kind of weapons are they using, how many AK-47 do they have, how many explosives do they have. They will take only 3 or 4 people in a chopper, go and clear everything. They will snap pictures before clearing them and bring back exhibit. We are about to finish it. And because of interest, personal interest, that if we allow mercenaries to finish this thing, we are not going to get anything. How much was the bill given by the mercenaries? Even Russia is employing mercenaries to fight for them, isn't it? Are we stronger than Russia? Is there anything wrong if you can bring somebody that can fight for you? There's nothing wrong in that. So I'm sorry if people are saying that National Assembly is not doing the needful, National Assembly is not providing the enabling laws. We have provided all the enabling laws. The enforcement of such laws is not ours. If government is not ready to implement, there is no way we can compel government The only thing we can advise government, if government refuses to do it, there's no way you can force them, because they have the machineries for implementation. You do not have.
So having listened to him, I think it's very clear that the North is the problem. Of course, Northern leaders are the problem of the North. Whether you call it the issue of insecurity, whether poverty, whether out of school children, they are the problem. For instance, it is not by coincidence, and it didn't start today, that a place, a state like Sokoto, like Kano, like Yobe, like name it, they account for the highest level of out of school children in Nigeria. But it was even surprising that the government, or rather the North, recently started blaming federal government for out of school children in Nigeria. Sorry, in the North, in the region. Because we know that even if you say universal basic education puts the responsibility of training Nigerian child, educating Nigerian child on the 3 tiers of government. However, what the Constitution says is that the federal government will provide the policy direction and the funding. The working of the whole issue, seeing that the children attend school, the school platform and all of that, falls under the purview of the state and local governments. And this, the southern part of the country have been doing. So the question is, why is it that they not account for the highest level of out of school children? And I must say that this is part of the reason we are seeing insurgency not abating, because the child refuses to educate, become vulnerable to be radicalized and become Boko Haram, ISWAP, bandits, as the case may be. And more so, as the issue of as the issue of banditry, as the issue of terrorism is tied with religion. We understand that even the Boko Haram means Western education is sin. So it means you are even fighting an ideology that the leaders of the North need to go back to the grassroots, need to go back to the foundation to start addressing. Meaning the children who are being given birth to now must be adequately and appropriately educated, oriented to see terrorism as to have desire for terrorism. Because just as the psychology put it, that the newly born child, the brain is seen as a tabula rasa. Until the critical right anything he or she wishes to write. So by the time the government, the parents, the guardian, the leaders in the North refuse to write the norms of the society in the brain of the newly born child in the North, of course, they become vulnerable to be radicalized. They will not become vulnerable to accept deviant acts of the society. And at the end of the day, they become a problem for everybody. Because in the money federal government have been using to fight insurgency from 2009 to date, have been put into, in the money federal government have been using to fight insurgency, fight terrorism, is channeled into infrastructure development. By now, we would have been seeing a high level of development in that area. And again, the lopsidedness of appointment of this current government that the North is using as a basis for saying they want power. I must say that it was Buhari that even started it and elevated it to the highest level. We can recall under Muhammadu Buhari how he was appointing Northerners at every given opportunity. How he was quick, how that government was quick to always say that they were using merit to select people who have been appointed. And the question then was, is it only in the northern part of the country you find those who are competent? Now, I think they have seen their match, they are complaining. And again, if that is the basis for Queen, the North are even saying they want power come 2027, I think they should have a rethink. Because they must realize that the South must be in power for 8 years. Before they start tinkering with the idea of coming back to power, I think that should be in 2031. Because that tacit agreement, that original agreement must be respected. And the South must be allowed to complete their 8 years. Because the North had their own 8 years under Muhammadu Buhari. The question is, if all the areas of imbalance that is existing in Nigeria is addressed, I think it will even be better for everyone. Because I can only imagine, why will a state like Kano be having 44 local governments? A state like Jigawa that is covered to Kano is having 27 local governments. A state like Lagos that is even more populated than Kano is having about 25 local governments. So if you are to share resources on the basis of local government, you see that a place like Kano that don't have even a drop of oil will get resources more than a place like Delta, Akwa Ibom, Rivers, Bayelsa that is even having oil. If not for even 30% derivative that is giving oil producing states some level of preferential treatment. And I think that best explains the reason we saw the serious opposition from Northerners when the government came up with the idea of tax reform bills. And what that tax reform bill sought to do was to address the age-long imbalance in revenue sharing. Because even when agriculture was the basis of economy, Nigerian economy, where the produce was coming from was having a reasonable part of the resources as compensation. I think it was up to 50%. Now, we are in the era of oil as the mainstay of Nigerian economy. That has been jettisoned. And someone want to review the tax reform bills that will compensate areas where goods are being consumed, where services are being derived, and somebody will stand against it. I understand that before the president assented to that bill, it was seriously watered down by northern leaders who seriously opposed it and saw it as a way of taking away their revenue. But you begin to wonder the revenue they are laying claim to. How did they even contribute to bringing that revenue? Then come to think of issue of even consumption of alcohol. You take the tax and of course you don't consume. You begin to wonder what kind of system are we running. But for me, I think this government should be bold enough to stand on its feet and tell the North that enough is enough, we must do the right thing. And to do the right thing is to correct all those areas of imbalance that have been existing in Nigeria. For instance, I do not see any justification behind why the Southeast should be having 5 states, while some state, every other region is having at least 6. There is no justification behind that. Because in Nigeria, for instance, you have 3 major ethnic groups: the Hausa, the Igbo, the Yoruba. So why should Southeast be having 5 states? There's no justification behind it by any standard. And for me, I think it should be addressed. And they should be given at least 6 states. That is why I note with concern the other time they were coming, not the other time, I think it's still in the pipeline, talking about the Council of Traditional Rulers that seek to make the Sultan of Sokoto and the Oni of Ife, Oni of Ife, permanent co-chair of that council, neglecting the southeastern part of the country. Even not just the southeastern part of the country, I may bold to say that it is unthinkable that you, through a bill, impose the Sultan of Sokoto on everybody as a permanent chairman of Nigerian Traditional Council of Nigerian Traditional Council of Rulers. It's not acceptable, because at no point in time was every other place in Nigeria under the command and control of the Sultan of Sokoto. So why should you not come and introduce a bill that seeks to impose him as leader of people by way of traditional rulership? This is like trying to achieve what Usman Danfolo could not achieve during the jihad, because his intention then was to conquer, subdue, subjugate, and take over everywhere. Coming around or coming with this bill, for me, is a strategy to actually bring back what Usman Danfolo could not achieve. We understand what happened in Ilorin the other time, previously. Let's go into all of the details, talking about the Janta Alimi and their Fonja story, how the Janta Alimi diplomatically used his expertise, his wisdom, and all of that to conquer and take over, or just take over Kwara kingship, talking about Ilorin. So I don't think that experience is what anyone want to go back to. Whether by way of bill that seek to make the Sultan the permanent chairman or whatever process, I don't think it's acceptable. That is why we are talking about people's oriented constitution, a situation where everybody should be on board to discuss the models how Nigeria can continue being together. Not the current status quo we have, a situation where the constitution was imposed on Nigerians by the military. For now, I must say very thankful for this.